Hi there. If you've wasted your time with Twitter recently, or this is far in the future and someone sent you this video in response to a tweet or something, you'd see that apparently I've had my DMs leaked. Well, not really. Someone put up a few screenshots of 2 isolated public comments out of long threads that are omitted, and a few DMs that are half cut off. I'd personally question the honesty of not keeping the full DMs when presenting them, but that's just a side point. If you didn't know, I always have my DMs open, and if you ever want to ask me something, you're more than free to. I respond to all my DMs, but it can take a minute for me to get to yours, because I get around 20-ish a day every day. With that said, though, for some reason, some people are painting these out to be so secretive and clandestine, leaked DMs that I never wanted people to see, or something. How a public comment gets leaked, I have no idea. Very strange. This will all be timestamped, so feel free to jump around if you like. Do note, something that I've found funny is that I have answered over 3,000 DMs, actually more than that, on my relatively short time on Twitter, and the most problematic takes that could be found are intentional, context-removed, nuanced comments, all several years old by the way, about complex events in which my text is never fully presented. I think that honestly speaks for itself. Regardless, I'll go through all of them and we can talk about it. Anyways, the person in question who shared these supposedly leaked DMs shall remain unnamed, and I strongly urge you not to disturb or harass them in any way. I'm unsure of their intentions, as they've been somewhat uncharitable towards me, but I believe they're just trying to bring forward something they believe to be problematic about a member of the leftist community. These sort of efforts help us grow, and is commendable, in my opinion. I want nothing but transparency with my community, and criticism, including self-criticism, is a core value of what makes us leftists. If this person would like to reach out to me directly, they're more than welcome to. Let's get to those sneaky leaked DMs, then, shall we? Underneath the damning tweet, I wrote, I invite every single person who has any issue with any statement I made to DM me. I keep them open for a reason. With the appropriate context, all of this isn't actually all that controversial, and I'm confident I can make that clear. Strong words, right? With this said, this person in question derisively replied, all this isn't actually all that controversial. In what world would calling Kurds reactionary, denying the Anfal genocide, and Halabja chemical attacks, saying you're a fan of the Ottoman Empire and defending Saddam not be controversial and horrible takes? Well, those are all some wild claims, strangely skewed, even. How about we give the context and you guys be the judge yourself of what I was trying to say? Let's get to it. We'll start with the calling Kurds reactionary bit. The first screenshot, which is being referenced, is of a public comment from maybe 4 years ago or so, which you can pause and read if you'd like. I will admit, though, that I was unnecessarily angry in dealing with the person I was replying to. This is something I've learned from since, and I do regret. The hostile language, the inflammatory hyperbole, all of it is unnecessary to get a point across, in my personal opinion. So do please learn from my experience. The gist of it, though, is this. Some white American guy was arguing, for many comments, as if he knew more on Iraq than I, an actual Iraqi. He spoke positively of post-American invasion Iraq, if I recall correctly, and when discussing Iraqi Kurds, he, for some reason, and with a lot of hostility, claimed that they are the greatest hope for the Middle East. He treated Kurds as a monolithic entity, and I even mentioned so later in the thread, which is conveniently omitted. My reply, that you see in the image, had specifically rural Kurdish farmers in northern Iraq and Syria in mind, because those were the people in question. With that added nuance, I really don't see how that statement is controversial. In case you didn't know, these aren't racist statements about rural farmers in Iraq, these are just simply the facts. Here in Iraq, for example, stoning of women, or honor killings, and female genital mutilation, all illegal under Iraqi law, occur almost exclusively amongst that same rural Kurdish minority. That doesn't mean I'm talking about educated people in Erbil, for example. The people who do this are in rural places that the central government, as well as the autonomous Kurdish government, have a hard time reaching, let alone educating and applying the law. This is a question of underdevelopment and lack of education, as well as a weak central government that cannot provide protection to women or basic enforcement of law. My intention was never to paint every single Kurd as socially conservative, and the convenient clipping of only my comment and nothing else makes that clear. I of course know better than that, as half, or actually a little over half of my extended family is Kurdish, and I've even commented with this level of nuance elsewhere several times. Clipping out a hyperbolic statement during a years-old argument, omitting context, and ignoring more recent statements indicating a different opinion isn't exactly fair, I'd say. Let's get to the second claim, denying the Anfal genocide. This is referring to the second screenshot of a DM you can see here. Note how it's cut in half. There was more to that message that was intentionally not kept in. Pause and read if you'd like. Let me add some context so people realize what's going on. Over a year ago or so, probably actually longer than that, I got maybe like 30 DMs all asking about quote-unquote controversial things about Iraq. In hindsight, it seems someone, a Discord group actually, I think, was looking for answers that they could clip out and point to in hopes of me saying something problematic. Well, after the 15th or so time answering very similar essay-long questions about the Iran-Iraq War, weird questions about vague events in Iraqi history, ethnic minorities, religion, etc., and the Anfal campaign, finally I started using shorthand to refer to the Anfal genocide. If I recall correctly, this is maybe the 6th or 7th time I was asked about this very question in a 2-day period, the screenshot in question. What I mean by saying no genocide took place is that, yes, many people were killed. Yes, it was unjust and those that commit the crime deserved punishments. And yes, the victims were majority Kurds, but also many Arabs and Assyrians too, something a lot of Westerners don't know about. My issue was with the term genocide, because the classification as genocide was only supported by the US, and maybe 2 other countries, as war drum propaganda for the Iraq War. In short, it was used as atrocity propaganda to justify the complete destruction of my country, the ruining of its infrastructure, and the murder of over 1 million of its citizens in cold blood, which funnily enough isn't considered genocide by the US or the wider Western left. That doesn't make the Anfal campaign any less valid or horrible, but the usage of the term is just too light and has personal associations of very negative things personally. I remember, in 2004, I was walking with a family member, and they decided to, strike up a conversation with a group of American soldiers that were on our street. I didn't speak English at the time, but this particular family member translated for me later. He asked the soldiers something along the lines of, "What are you doing in Iraq? Don't you see that our people and your people don't want the war?" A white soldier, in their stupid fucking getup, almost immediately retorted, "But the Kurdish genocide." The intellectual disconnect of that event and what the Americans were doing in Iraq, and technically still are doing, has stayed with me, and as you may assume, influenced my opinions. It's an issue with semantics, that's all. The nuance fell through because that particular screencap DM was maybe the 2,000th time I was answering the same question. Nowadays, if I get repeat questions like this, I take my time to write out a well-sourced and detailed DM that I can copy and paste to save my time, and to communicate my intentions clearly. I didn't do that at the time, and my fatigue at getting the same question over and over led me to shortcutting my answers. The Halabja thing is exactly the same. I'm not denying anything, and the DM actually makes that fairly clear. Also, I have changed my opinion slightly since then. This was quite a while back, actually, and for some reason people on Twitter seem to think that everyone's opinions remain static throughout their whole lives. Regardless, I only ever learned the official Iraqi narrative as a kid and never looked into it further because it's an event that happened years before I was born and had little relevance to my life at that point. In the past year or so, though, I've been reading several books on the topic, and I can recommend some if people would like, so DM me, and I've seen some errors with the version I was taught. This video is getting long enough though, so maybe I can make a general history of video where I talk about the current understanding I have later. Now that I think of it actually, I get this, haha, this'll get him, give me something controversial to screen cap, type of question all the time nowadays, actually daily pretty much. I always answer them, even the pretty obvious ones. Personally, I believe it says a lot that all of 4 screenshots is what was found of the thousands of DMs I've answered. With that said, next DM. This is the Xinjiang issue being discussed, and here's the pic if you're interested. Again, note how they're cut off. Why? I'm genuinely curious. Do they really think that little of people's intelligence? Obviously, anybody seeing this would think, there seems to be a lot more to this message. I wonder why it was omitted. Whatever. This one, I honestly don't see the controversy in. My general perspective, which I've repeated time and time again, is this. I personally question the Western depiction of the Xinjiang issue. Western press has routinely presented photos that aren't from China at all as Uyghur detainees, has intentionally mistranslated Chinese documents to force the worst possible meaning out of certain terminology used, have claimed ridiculous things like Uyghur women having 6 IUDs forcibly placed into them, have constantly relied on the work of Adrian Zenz, who has been so thoroughly disproven that it boggles the mind how some people still accept him as a source. I can go on. If the Xinjiang issue was truly as the West portrays it, why would they have to rely on so many lies that get debunked by laymen on the internet? Honestly, the truth speaks for itself. There would be no need to embellish, or, more accurately, outright lie about what's happening. With that said, that doesn't mean I think it's paradise. Increased police presence is never a pleasant thing to see. I've never claimed no injustices have ever occurred. In fact, I think China has committed many mistakes in their approach towards extremism in Xinjiang, and I plan on covering this in a future video. My sole point is, well, how about I quote the cutoff section of the DM, actually. In my personal experience, though, the position of the Chinese on re-educating radicalized segments of their population through language programs, vocational schooling, and proper religious guidance is a dream that I wish would take place in my country, Iraq. We have many of the same issues, Al-Qaeda affiliated or otherwise Islamist groups that seek separatism or political power, except in my country they're allowed to run rampant because the central government is inept and cannot actively exercise its power over these groups. Comparing the Iraqi strategy of doing nothing, the American strategy of bombing a country or a population into the Stone Age, and the Chinese strategy of re-education and employment, I think we can see which is the better alternative. This doesn't mean what China is doing is perfect, nor does it mean I believe what they say is 100% true. But so far, the claims of the West have been filled with holes, while the Chinese presentation of the situation has seemingly been closer to the truth. Note, closer, not exactly the whole truth. Don't misconstrue what I'm trying to say. That being said, I've also stated I'm open to having my mind changed, and people are more than welcome to write to me explaining what convinced them. With that said, I then go on to link several resources people can check out, including the fantastic video made by Bay Area 415, which I highly suggest you check out yourself. Now, could you honestly say that this take is lacking nuance? You can disagree with it, sure, but it just seems like some people have already made up their minds on what they think I think, and then force that circular understanding into this obviously square hole. Finally, the last DM, which I've covered like a dozen times before, but for some reason some people refuse to listen. I'm a fan of the Ottoman Empire generally, is the claim. I honestly am disappointed I even need to explain this, but here it is. Funnily enough, this is clarified lower down in that same thread, if I recall correctly. It is several years old at this point, if my memory serves me right. Simply, my being a fan of the Ottoman Empire is the same way someone is a fan of the Aztec Empire, or the Warring States period in Japan, or some Chinese dynasty. It's purely out of historical interest. I even say this in the comment, and I quote, I like the early period much more than the 19th century period, implying a disassociation between, for example, the Mamluk and Ottoman rivalry of the 1500s and the monstrosity that was the 19th century Ottomans. In fact, I highlight the only two positive things of the late Ottoman Empire in that same picture. The Tanzimat reforms, which decriminalized homosexuality, for example, and the Millet system, which maintained some level of religious freedom within communities, and even that system is highly complex and had many issues. I don't know how you were taught English, but when I learned it, saying you like something much more than something else doesn't necessarily mean you like the latter thing too. To my second language understanding of English, I like vanilla ice cream much more than chocolate ice cream doesn't imply that I like chocolate ice cream. Quite the opposite, in fact. Same thing with the above statement. If I've got my English wrong, then excuse me, but this is not my first language. To put it simply, I find their conflict with the Safavids fascinating. I think the conquest of Constantinople is a very fun topic to learn about, that sort of stuff. You can find the politics and legal policies of a long-dead empire interesting, historically, without supporting them, whatever that means. I've mentioned this practically every time people ask me about this, but for some reason it never sticks. They always default to, oh, that means he supports the Armenian genocide and hates Balkan people, or something. If you've seen the way I talk to you, Gopnik, you'd very much know that I do not hate Balkan people. The person in question, who shared these screenshots themselves, implied I was trying to claim the Ottomans were socialist, or something. Just silly, honestly. Finally, the last point that doesn't really have a screenshot, but they still throw it in just because, I guess, is the supporting Saddam thing. I do not support Saddam. I've said this time and time again. My position on this is as such. The Ba'ath administration in Iraq wasn't great, but it was better than the current Iraqi government that let ISIS run rampant for years, for example, has wages 8 months late on the regular, no infrastructure maintenance, no education, no employment, a highly understaffed and shortage-rampant healthcare system, militias running free and harassing people, especially medical personnel, and much more. All of this with no sanctions or international vilification, something the Ba'ath had to deal with throughout their rule. This isn't controversial, this is just the truth. The Gorbachev-era USSR wasn't ideal, but was still better than the nightmare that Russia became after its illegal dissolution of the USSR. Doesn't mean I like Gorbachev. Same thing here. And that's that. I'm assuming the best of the person who posted this and those that compiled these quite old comments and DMs. Though the timestamps on them say 1 year ago or similar, which means someone has been compiling and sitting on these 4-year-old screenshots for years. Very strange behavior. In good faith, I appreciate those in the community that want transparency with my opinions, as well as those that see something that is seemingly problematic and as a result want to highlight it. I ask anyone who disagrees with me or finds my take still problematic to engage with this video in good faith. If they continue to hold the same opinions, even with the added context, then please let me know. DM me, anytime. We can talk about my positions, and yours, and hopefully we can reach a common and educated understanding based on mutual respect. As for those that still dislike me, or have issues with my opinions, that is perfectly fine. In fact, I actively invite that. I want to hear differing opinions. I want to correct mistaken beliefs that I may have, and to further grow. Regardless, I'll share with you some Arab wisdom. Take the good and leave the bad. Feel free to use adblock and not contribute to my Patreon while watching my videos if it helps you learn about something. We don't need to all agree as long as we collectively learn and grow together, in my opinion. That is that. Sorry about this impromptu video. What was supposed to go up today was a video on mutual aid, community organizing, and organization building. But this and YouTube not accepting the upload got in the way. That'll be up eventually, so stay tuned.